we're going to go through what I call the big three infrastructure projects that we are involved in. I'll keep it pretty high level, I think, but I'm open to questions. Some of it, I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Commissioner Lopez hasn't been with us as long as the rest of you, so and we can certainly go farther with that. So the first one we'll talk about is the North Junction. And this map, I just like that a lot because this really kind of is a big piece of the infrastructure, the interstate level infrastructure around this town. How many of you drove through this to get here today? Yeah, you did. You did. A lot of you did. If you live northeast, you got to skip it. I came from the office, so I came from the south and missed it. Yes, Mason Ridge. He lives northeast, right? He didn't drive through it enough. So a little quick history. The North Junction, as we know it, the first three highways went in the late 60s and early 70s. So think about that as being 1950s, early 60s design standards. The Northeast Expressway, K96, came in the early 90s to the south, where it hooks in right now. This is running 97,000 vehicles a day. 10% of them, about 9,700, are trucks. That's a pretty big number. By 2050, they expect the traffic to be at 160,000 a day. Now, I don't know if they're factoring in what might happen in transportation as a whole, but it needs some help right now. The infrastructure that we have is 50 years old, more or less. In 2015, KDOT, this has been around for a while, but in 2015, KDOT did do a concept study, and gave us the overall plan that we're working off of right now. And with modifications, it's a plan. This to get us a little oriented, I think, and some of this is nomenclature. I gotta find all the right buttons. So here we go. Out here, the green phase, if you drive anywhere from on 235, starting at about Meridian, you hit the construction that's been going on here. That is part of North Junction. It doesn't look like it, but it sets up a lot of things that we need to make the North Junction work. And so that's green phase. Then, there we go. Out here, this more orangish color is what we're calling the accelerated gold phase. And some of the studies is called phase 2A. We do have county funding in that. That is set in 2020 and 2021. That's already done. The big one that's on the table right now is the rest of the gold phase, the actual gold color. Call that 2B. And we still need to work out the funding for that. And then out in the future, this is kind of like 235 and Kellogg. There are about 4 colors of phases out there, and we've done 2, or maybe we need to do a third one. This one's out in the future somewhere, the purple phase, to really kind of finish everything up. So the money's always a problem. So in 2018, so we had the concept study in 2015 and 2018. We weren't getting much traction. So the city of Wichita and Sedgwick County agreed to put up $1 million so that consultants could be hired to help with grants and to subsidize KDOT's expenditures to buy right-of-way. So early on, you need to get right-of-way, and these grants, these build and infra grants, are pretty complicated. And it's a big kind of a market. It's much marketing as anything. So it's a different process than what we're used to using. So the first one we went after in 2018, we went after a build grant. Don't ask me what that acronym stands for. I never can remember, but basically they're capped at $25 million for the entire gold phase. So 2A and 2B together at that point in time. We didn't get that grant. But we learned a lot. They have a really great debriefing process at the federal level. They're willing to get on the phone for 30 minutes and walk through, what was good about the application, what wasn't, and try to help. We went back in 2019 and we tried an infra grant. Don't ask me what that stands for, but that's for bigger projects. Seems like that whole gold phase again would have fit into that pretty well, but again, no grant for this one. Now this is both of these grants are a little tricky. They're handled out of the Federal Secretary of Transportation's office. There's a lot of things they're looking at. What is it they're trying to promote at the time? We're competing against really big communities. So it's pretty tough to get this money. At least that's what I learned through 2 rounds. So Since we weren't successful in 18 and 19 on the grant funding, we still had a problem. The state knows there's a problem. We went through a transportation planning program with them, or a process. They eventually created the IKE program, and they included what they call the Kta cost share program, which is an opportunity to take state funds in the IKE program and reach out to a local community, and the locals have to put in 25% of the money. You have to have quite a bit of skin in the game. They control that program in Topeka. They awarded Gold Junction Gold Phase A. So at this point, they'd gone through and they looked at it. They want to keep everything moving. So they want to do A, and then we'll worry about the next big chunk later. That's a $30 million project. The locals are the city and the county. That's 25%, $7.5 million. So we had $3.75 million to cover on that project, which we did. That headed on down the road. It's still under construction. They're still working on it, still buying right away, but it's got serious momentum, and it's going to get there. Went back in 2020. We did another build grant. We actually hired a different consultant this time, somebody that looked like they might have a little different perspective on it, might be able to do a little better. We were successful, but at the very end of the process, they called and talked to Gary Jansen over at the city and said, so basically this is looking pretty good, but what are you going to do if we don't give you the whole $25 million? And so, not knowing what the number is, the answer is, well, yeah, we're still doing it. We're going to figure out how to get this done. So they did go ahead and award that grant for the second phase of the gold phase. I'm sorry, yeah, second phase of the gold phase was really kind of the focus of this. So this one, kind of the important things here. This is the $7.5 million that we're having to come up with. This is the whole budget for the thing, and with the build grant, there's a $25 million cap. So we had $25 million that we'd applied for. This is all the state's participation, quite a bit. This is the city and the county. So that's what we went after. Here's what they did. They said, you can have $21 million. Again, good deal, we'll take it. This, and there's not slides in the interim to show this, but some of you are fully aware that we had a long conversation over the last, probably since October. We then had a $4 million shortfall. This is all budgeted and ready to go. So we thought for a long time, worst case scenario, city and county got to split that. Lindsay's got to find me $2 million. I don't know how that's going to work out, and we still hadn't, and today not officially figured out where this 7.5 comes from. So the good news is, and I'm not sure quite where they're coming up with the money, recently, within the last 10 days, we got word that the state would cover that $4 million from some source. If it's federal money coming down or what, we don't know, but they covered that. So we're back down to the $7.5 million that we need to come up with. So this is just really high level. The obvious question is, where are you going to get $7.5 million? Just remind you that in early 2020, when COVID was firing up and people were thinking sales tax was going to tank, we made some changes to the CIP, and we did pull out $2 million worth of sales tax, just to make sure we didn't overspend, lose track of what we're doing. We think, based on sales tax estimates, that's still pretty much intact. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's done better than anybody expected. So that's clearly a source. We had the $1 million deal with the city of Wichita. We have not spent all that money, but I don't know what the balance is. We'll have to figure that out with them, but whatever's left there might be a source for us. And we do have project savings and projects as we go along. So we're going to have to shake the box a little bit and find out where those are and see how much we can drag in there. And again, we have flexibility. We can make adjustments in our 5-year CIP to make room for this. But I think it's doable. We just don't have it all worked out yet. Well, Lynn Packer's actually working on it, but this latest piece of not having to come up with the $2 million it was good news for us. So just kind of an overall summary again. All of this would be about $300 million to do this whole thing. The $65 million on the green phase, that's all state. Well, they probably have some federal money, but that's all the state. That's been going since 2019. That's going to be done by the end of this year. The accelerated gold phase is due to start kind of right on the heels of that. don't take these dates verbatim, like this is actual, I'm using years because things change based on what happens with right-of-way or a utility relocation or a permit. Again, we're into that for 3.75, and that should be in the 21-23 timeframe, and then they'll move on to the rest of the gold phase. We're into it for 7.5. The whole thing is about $116 million. So it's a big project. I guess for reference, the 235 in Kellogg, when we did that one, that was a $116 million project. We had $11.6 million in that one. So it's not uncommon to spend this. I don't like doing it, but this is how you get them done. You got to put local money in them to get people to come to your project. Keys to success here, again, strong public and private partnerships, and I'm not even going to list them all. It's a bunch of people, local communities, the South Central Kansas Transportation Coalition through the Chamber is a big player. They keep hearing constantly from the state how effective that's been to have that coalition together and running. REAP, I mean, we pulled in all the chips, right? Every time we did an application, we need your feedback. Persistence, you just have to keep at it. I did miss, always talking about regional benefits, we're talking about statewide benefits, why it's important to do the project. Flexible thinking, you know, KDOT's been, everybody's been doing that, and flexible financing. So, you take questions on this one real quick if you have any specifically. Commissioner Howell.
Yeah, so on Kellogg in 235, we only did first phase, and I think 3 other phases have not been funded, or they're not even on the schedule as far as I know. Is there a chance that North Junction's going to go to phase 2, the next phase at the end? Are we going to do all 4 phases?
Okay, so the question was, North Junction, we did like the first phase out of 4. Do we think we're going to go on the, West Kellogg? On the North Junction, do we think we'll go to the 4th one? I think that, like West Kellogg, those are, on West Kellogg, they bought right away to cover all the eventual phases, just so that, because that's always an issue, but it could be a long time before the next phases come in. I know the next one they're talking about is kind of that leg that comes across Town West from West Street and it gets on, and that's a weaving area that's really tight and short, but nobody has it in a plan yet, I don't think. So up here, I think it's going to be, you know, we get this done, it's going to be 10 years before anybody starts talking about the purple phase, but it's just.
What about the orange phase?
Okay, so the orange phase, make sure we're all on the same page here. This is 2A. That's going to be the next thing to go.
Okay.
Okay, and then this yellowish or more goldish phase is the one after that. That's all teed up. The only thing that doesn't have is the purple.
All right, I had it backwards. Yeah, like Kellogg in 235, is any of that even on the horizon at all, other than?
I think that thing across Town West is on the horizon on Kellogg in 235.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's actively talking about the next things after that.
All right, thanks.
Anything else real quick? Okay. Move on to the Northwest Bypass. So this one is, this is maybe not my favorite map, but what I like about this one is you can see, boy, I can't find myself here anyway. Anyway, you can see the kind of orange color lines up here. You see the green line that comes down, and so this green and red changes over just south of 21st Street. Then you have the red project that comes on down to Kellogg, gets the interchange, and then we have this purple project that's through Goddard and goes out. So what the state did is they designed this in 3 pieces. These are all at what we'd call field check level, about 50% design. They've been on the shelf for a while. And then the orange up there is kind of where they were, and this is an older drawing, but it hasn't really changed. There, it's kind of a high priority area for getting right away. A little history on this one. So in 97, KDOT began a formal study. And I did have a conversation with Steve Lackey, if anybody knows Steve. He was the city's public works director 2 people back. And most recently was working for Trans Systems, and he's retired from that. But this one actually started because the District 5 engineer out of Hutch, which we're in District 5, Wade Colwell, actually called him up one day and said, you know, we're doing this stuff up. This will be in the mid-90s. We're doing all this stuff at the North Junction, but I'm looking at what's going on, and I really think you guys need to start, we all need to start thinking about what's next west of 235. And so that was kind of the genesis of this thing. In the early 2000s, they did an initial public involvement. In 2006, they selected this preferred alternative, which is the route that we're looking at still today. And in 2007, the county established a protective overlay in the zoning code that, I won't go to that yet. So the protective overlay is kind of, there's a slide on it, but I'll do it right now, is basically a, sort of a tripwire. So if you're within this area where the road is going to go, your property's in that area, and you try to get a building permit, change the zoning, or do a plat, nobody stops you, but if you show up at MABCD, then they call Public Works, and they say, something's trying to happen here, and then we call Topeka, they say, something's trying to happen here, and then Topeka looks at what's going on, KDOT, and they make a determination, do we need to get this, start negotiating with these people so we can get it bought before they do something. One of the biggest things, I think, I don't have the numbers, but on East Kellogg, I'm sure Pete knows this, big cost out there is trying to get right-of-way done. I mean, there's building the road, and there's what it costs to move businesses, churches, houses. So this is kind of a tool to give a best opportunity to KDOT to keep things cleaned up out there. This project includes, we've talked about this some before, but there's a flooding problem where the Dry Creek jumps over into the Calfskin Creek and comes down through town, ends up at Maple and 119th in a place that it's not supposed to be. It was an unknown thing until it happened in the Halloween flood in 1998. We have, over the years, worked with the city of Wichita. A solution to that is to put in a large detention facility. It really can go right next to to the Northwest Bypass. It can be a source of dirt for the Northwest Bypass, so that's part of the project. I think KDOT's everybody's on board for that. Again, it was designed for construction in phases. That's important because we don't know that it would be possible to build this whole thing in one piece. Estimated right-of-way cost here is $50 million. That's an old estimate, probably still pretty good. And the estimated construction cost of that whole thing is over $500 million. So right-of-way, we talked about the sort of tripwire system on the right-of-way. And so total, we need 1,334 acres of right-of-way right now today. Well, a year ago, we had 470 acres, about 35% of it. And again, expected to cost $50 million. Starting in 2006, the city of Wichita and the county were together at this point in time, and I'm not sure that Goddard or Mays were in it, but we started having a series of 5-year agreements where it was a cost sharing, and originally it was, we put in $1, KDOT put in $2. So this is just a series, we're on our 4th one. The red highlighted one is the one that you would have approved late last year. And so this keeps going forward. We're at a point now, the current contract we have, we get to decide how much we put in. They'll match us dollar for dollar, and we can get them for up to $1 million. So if all that happened year after year, that'd be another $10 million. So we'd be at $33 million when we got done. We'd be 2/3 of the way through. Innovation, this is where we talked about the protective right-of-way, so I won't go back through that again. Alternative financing, so last year, KDOT and Kta got involved. And so this group, the county, Goddard, Mays, and KDOT and the Kta, and that was a big agreement, went through 5 signatures. That's very rare. Agreed to do a toll feasibility study. So the thought is maybe we do this northern part down to 21st Street. Maybe tolling is a way to pay for it or part of it. And with open road tolling that KTA is implementing everywhere, if we just built this with open road tolling, it would be kind of interference free. You'd get tagged for it, but if you had a K tag, you'd just fly through the on-ramps and the off-ramps and go. Study's gonna try to determine if it's feasible for, just the north part or the whole thing. And it's about $70,000. I can't remember what we put in it. It's probably 20 or less. And we expect to see the results back this spring. I know they have the draft in Topeka, and between the KTA and KDOT, they're reviewing it and going back and forth. They're just not ready to share yet. This series of slides I put in just because it kind of helps to tell us why this is an important project. WAMPO has a regional priorities list, and that's trying to keep the projects that are most important right at the front of the list. South Central Coalition has a list. Those are, I think, a pretty good alignment at this point. They try to keep it in alignment. Commissioner Dennis worked on that a lot. He was pointing out that they weren't really aligned very well. But this project has gone through review with them to get to that list. And we had used, WAMPO has some desired outcomes that they use to put together their, it's a long-range planning document, but they do the plan every 5 years. So this is the process we went through. And so these are the outcomes that they're working with. The only one that really don't hit is equity and diversity. It's just hard to, it just kind of doesn't really address an issue there. So we'll just hit them real quick. Safety and health, again, limited access facilities. They reduce traffic conflicts and increase safety. The bypass route would reduce traffic on I-135 and US 400. That would lead to lower congestion and increased safety on these routes. So right now you come around 135 or 235 and you're hitting Kellogg and you're heading west. And we're bringing all this truck traffic that's trying to get west through downtown essentially. And again, it incorporates the Dry Creek detention storage. So expanding the economy through mobility. We hear at WAMPO a lot about freight and how the movement of people and goods, and this is kind of a big driver. If you can't move people, it's hard to build a new business or grow a new business. So here we're looking on experience. We're saying, look at what happened with the Northeast Expressway and how significant growth occurred out there, and expansion in the surrounding cities was pretty massive, and I think that's a contributor. It is important to note that major investments have already occurred out here along the Northwest Bypass route. We've got the Christie Ascension has done the St. Teresa Hospital. We've got the VIG Northwest Y. You have significant developments in Wichita, Mays, and Goddard. Integrated multimodal transportation network. So, you need a robust interstate level backbone for whatever you're doing to carry freight and passenger vehicles safely through and around the region. And one of the things that I try to remind people one of the things KDOT's really looking at, and sometimes it's like see the forest for the trees kind of thing. We look at what's happening around the town, but I think KDOT's in this thing because of that, but also because this is a hub, and freight's trying to get from here to southwest Kansas and down into New Mexico. And it's not, I was looking at a map the other day, and it's a couple thousand trucks a day, maybe heading out that way, back in and out. But if you're the statewide transportation planners, you're looking at what are the bottlenecks in the freight network and the passenger network, and this is going to become a bottleneck if they don't have it. Expanding the economy, attracting talent. So again, we really do have low congestion here. We don't have much travel delays, as much as we like to complain about our favorite light that we've had to sit at. Compare it to any place else, and it's a great place to live. This, though, would provide a tool to keep the commute times down, deal with congestion in the future. And when we're looking at transportation projects, they do find that reliable commute times are important for workforce attraction and retention. People get frustrated if they can't. I mean, you can deal with whatever your commute is if you know what it's going to be. If it's supposed to be a 20-minute commute for you and 3 days a week it's 30, you get kind of upset, and then you might go somewhere else. This one is slides about, I think the base map's about a year old, but this one is kind of helpful to visualize where the cities are right now with respect to this thing. I have gone ahead and denoted where St. Teresa's Hospital, that's the H is at, the YMCA. And this is an important thing that Steve Lackey mentioned to me that I hadn't thought about. City of Wichita spent a lot of money 15 years ago to put a sewer plant up at 37th and 135th, Plant 3. And I don't have the maps for it, but I know they have a pump station right here by the fire station. This thing is probably designed to capture a pretty good area in here by gravity. And so they kind of have a stranded investment. If this doesn't take off, they can't really get anything else to it. So what do you need for development? You need sewer, water, and you need transportation. And y'all know where the new water plant goes in. It's right over here. Just means they can pump it anywhere, but it's going to be easy to pump it to the west side. So I think they are getting out there. City growth is pretty good. This is a map out of the Planning Department's comprehensive plan. And this one you might study later, but basically the sort of brownish color in here is new residential they're looking at by 2035. There's some mixed uses in this kind of crosshatch thing. They're projecting that this is going to be there. It's going to go, not that far out. So there's a question on this one from Commissioner Cruz. We've got an economic analysis, and this is a whole lot of verbiage, but the answer is no. We cannot find one. I talked to Steve Lackey. He doesn't remember one, and basically that's where this story comes from. Back 25 years ago, you didn't start with an economic analysis. You looked at where people need to go. And so they were working on a plan to deal with congestion and transportation. Out on the Northeast Expressway corridor, that was kind of interesting because when that was coming in the early 90s, the route was actually planned to be a little bit farther to the north. They had a couple of big owners, the Kochs and George Ablaw, and they wanted this thing to happen, but they wanted it farther south, so they offered to donate quite a bit of right-of-way to get it done, to draw it down. That's anecdotal, but that's like people in this business understand the value of having that on your property or next to your property or close to your property. And so I think wherever, if you put this thing out here, it's, well, what Spears would have said, it's going to happen. Did pull in a map of that real quick just to orient everybody. So this, kind of pink dashed line is where the Northeast Expressway lays right now. And this is a 10-mile-long project, and about 3 miles of that in the middle here, that red cloud, that's what was donated. And so about a third of the right-of-way was donated to make that one happen. We shared that project with the city. You kind of see, where are we at? So you see this blue line here? Really right just down the street here, about off the south edge of the airport of the property. That's where we started buying right-of-way. We bought all this right-of-way as the county down in here. The city would have bought, I'm saying it cost them money, but this was an airport property right in here at the time, and so they did a sale, transfer in this, and then that was donated, and they would have had to pick up those pieces. And so, I don't know, I guess it's just history about partnerships again, and just kind of supports the fact that somehow we end up in the middle of all these things. But you can see that, we'll try this. So if this was running Chrome, this is what Tom had remembered, this is the time-lapse thing, but I can't depend on the technology, so if we send this to you and you want to Chrome or paste it in, that's fine, but I'll take a little bit shorter route. This is why it's going to go faster with the slides, Lindsay, because I'm going to manually do this. It's about 7 slides. So this is 1989. The Northeast Expressway did not exist, and basically doing 5-year jumps. So by 94, you can see the big white line through there. It's all in. 99, you can see the growth coming in. 2004, 09, 14. 18 is the last one at the time that I did this, put this together, but that's where that did. Now, just to make it a little bit easier, this is 89, and 18. And I think you can see a significant difference between the two. It's actually, to me, more helpful than having that time lapse through for 30 years because you just can't track it. Any questions about that?
I have a quick question about, so if you go back to the one that says city limits, it's the green space. I don't know what number it is. That one, yes. Okay, so if this was built and you had trucks coming from the north that needed to go west rather than have to go all the way down to Kellogg to hit that, which would then free up traffic. Is there a way to figure out how many of those trucks are going that way? Like, how often would this be used that would then free up the other space over here? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, so I think if you were coming from the north or the northeast, you'd hit the north junction, which we're doing now. You would hit 235 before you ever got into town. You would swing around K96, get off of K96 out here by Mays, and pull this around and you drop back down into Goddard, and skip all of that. I know that. Now, my thinking is we may get some answers on that in the toll study, because they're, I would think, going to want to make some projections about what the traffic, trucks and different classes of traffic would be coming around this thing in a toll situation, which maybe, I don't know, could be a little bit off, just because if we're saying it's a toll, you got to pay a fee to do it. So I guess it's addressing the question of who'd be willing to pay to do that, maybe not who would do it if it was free. But
Well, outside of the economics that might happen, let's say hypothetically, to Commissioner Howell's point about the West Kellogg expansion and how.
we would skip West Kellogg, because that thing is right there. So we would bypass Kellogg's crowded today, even with
But
all
what
the
I'm
stuff we've done.
saying is, if that's not there, they're going to use it,
Yes,
right?
right.
That's my point.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so I guess I just wondered if there was a way to know how much traffic would this road alleviate from the other methods of transportation? That's my question. Do you understand my question?
I do. I don't know the answer. And I don't know, even went back to the 2006 study, I don't know, that would really help us, but.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on that one? Then we got one more real quick. Talk about 95th Street, or what we kind of call Arc 95. This one has a lot of people interested in it. It is, well, I'll go to some maps, we'll talk about that. There were, so the question in 2008, and this was originally was a WAMPO study. All these other things are going on, but what we don't have is a interstate level loop around the south side of Wichita. And so the original study was, what would you do down there if you're going to do something? There have subsequently been studies, two of them that were related to the city of Hayesville with the Meridian and the Broadway corridor plans. The casino area transportation plan, which was happening when they were trying to figure out what traffic would do with the casino. And then we did this ARC 95 study in 2017. 2008 study, they considered multiple routes. They identified that there was a lack of crossings on the Arkansas River in the south part of the county. And so just for those of you that may not be real familiar with it, you can cross the river coming out of Mulvane on the state highway on the county line, and then you have to come up to 83rd Street, which comes right into the city of Derby. And we have nothing in between. Then you get to 47. You start to get them when you get up into the city. So, for example, Mulvane, they have a problem because if there's a train that's, and there's, Commissioner Howell probably knows, it's in the 30s, the trains that are on this corridor on the Burlington Northern every day. And so if the train is going slow or parked across the state highway, and your fire department's on the wrong side of the road, or EMS is on the wrong side of the road, then you have a problem, or just people wanting to do things. Nobody wants to have to drive clear to 83rd to get around. So they basically concluded that by 2030, 10 years from now, that the crossings that we have at 83rd and the state highway would be over capacity. So this is a little bit better map. So the purple running around this whole thing, the study area for the original 2008 study, basically it was looking at getting off of Kellogg at Greenwich Road, and how would you loop down south and come back up on the west side. And then 119 puts you close to, but not right in the middle of, the interchange with the northwest bypass as it comes around. And these blue ones then are the intermediate sort of corridor studies on Meridian. How would Meridian, Broadway connect with the world? How would all this connect with the casino? There's a couple other things that are on here. You see in the middle of purple, that's where they've identified the green star. That's the kind of future crossing that they arrived at. They've highlighted the Burlington Northern line. So what we have is K15, and immediately next to that we have the Burlington Northern. So this two transportation structures are just an impediment, two things in them, all on their own. And of course, Spirit is to the north in Wichita. So when we came back in 2017, we wanted to refine, we need to drill in some more. So we're not doing design, we're trying to really okay, time has gone by, what are things looking like, what do we think we really need to do, try to work out sort of a long-range plan, a little bit more, I'm sorry, go ahead. Am I the wrong one?
A long-range plan or a long-range plan?
Okay, there's a reprimand coming. I didn't do that slide, but you're right. That's all right. There was one this morning that had, Jeremy's slide had moth to month. I should have given this to Lindsay to check it out. So, and develop cost estimates, right? Because that's an important thing everybody wants to know. So we had to kind of, we're not going to build that whole thing all at once. So we tried to focus this in. So we really focused on the space from Broadway to Woodlawn. So Woodlawn would get you on the south side of Derby. I can tell you it's not included here that some years ago, Derby and Mulvane have done some joint planning studies about development in there, and that's kind of the break line, really, 95th Street, between where they think they'll all end up. There's potential in here for a new interchange with the Turnpike. It comes through here. And then the big problem, again, we had this impediment where the K15 and the BNSF Railroad are together, and they are, that's even a problem for, even if you're not emergency vehicles and you're just trying to get somewhere, you could sit on K15 for quite a while trying to get off to the west. Do you have something you want to do now, or you want to wait? You're preparing. Oh, okay. We can do it anytime you want. All right. So the basic design recommendation is to look at 2 and 3 lane improvements and have the ability to expand to 5. So what we want here, the original SAT study in 2008 came back and said, you can't afford to do interstate level stuff. You need to think about doing a parkway, which we really don't do here, but you see them in different places. It'd be kind of a wide median. If it wasn't that it was 70 miles an hour, 254 looks a lot like a parkway, but really wide. But so that's kind of was the original concept, and they've kind of fine-tuned that. So, and the idea being be able to expand it, 30 years from now or whatever when we need to do more. So this is kind of what they're depicting down here below. This is it's really kind of got some green space around it, and it does take a little bit of right-of-way, but it's not like an interstate level thing. And we need to get a above-grade crossing, a separated crossing for K15 and the BNSF, because if we have a river crossing and you can't get to it because the train is there, you didn't really accomplish much. So this one, this is a strip map in 2 pieces. So if you take the bottom one, the left-hand side, where the yellow's at, and visually slide that to the right and hook it up to the right-hand side of the top one, that would be a long strip map. It's about 3 miles long. So what they came back with is basically, we're looking at 3 phases here. So you got the purple, which is the first phase. You got to have the river crossing, you got to deal with K15, and you got to deal with the BNSF. And we can tie that into existing roadway at Hillside. And then that would work for a while. And then you'd come in, and they'd also want to do some improvements over on the far west end of that, if you see that upper drawing where the purple's at. And I'll also mention here in the purple area, if you remember, we did a bridge on 95th Street over the Cowscan Creek at Broadway. That is in the purple area. But we knew enough about this at the time. We moved that up to a 4 or 5 lane bridge so that we wouldn't have too narrow of a bridge in here whenever this came in. So again, bridge is going to be there 50 or 60 years. This is probably going to happen by then. Second thing would be in the yellow or the gold color, do that piece next. That's got, right in here, this is the Kta Interchange, if that could happen. So in this scenario, you could come from the south on K15, you could jump off at 95th, and you could get over here to the KTA and head right on up the turnpike, or the other way, right? And then the last thing that you'd do is this green, this phase 3, and this is just kind of wide open. There's not much out there right now. This is a little more detail on the river crossing, the east end of it. I won't explain every detail of this, but this whole thing at K15 is a problem, and 95th is a problem. But this actual concept came from, they were having public meetings, and they actually had a railroad engineer, and I think we're talking about the guy that drives the train, not an engineer like I am, and these guys get all over the place, and so they wrestled with a number of different alignments, and he came into the meeting and looked, and I said, well, look, I've seen this thing in, name your city in Texas, and it works really well. And that is the layout that we've kind of ended up recommending. It didn't come from the engineers, it came from a user. But basically, it just moves the intersection up here, and then this would be bridged over the two. It's very difficult. You're kind of stuck with going over whatever the railroad's got because it's very difficult and expensive to get them to lower or raise or do anything. So we're in a bad spot. So what do we get out of this? Going to enhance the safety and again, the emergency response time. It's going to improve traffic flow. It's going to help with congestion. We're going to get people off of K15 and out of that corridor and onto the rest of the system or west where they need to go before they get into town. Better for multimodal access. Again, this should be a trigger for economic development down here. To me, this is a big truck parking lot somewhere. There's a lot of floodplain. Great place to do something like that, maybe. And again, get that grade separated crossing with the BNSF. Phase 1, the purple, $62 million. This right-of-way number looks a lot better than stuff we've talked about earlier today. $700,000 estimate for right-of-way. $12.3 million for design. I think that might be a little high, but that's planning number. $49 million for construction. Phase 2 is $24 million, but they figure it's $7.5 million for the Kta interchange. Generally on an interchange like that, if the Kta can make a financial case for it, they're going to pick that cost up in their system. And then that third phase is $8 million. That's just pretty much regular road work. We're going to continue coordinating with the local partners. I can tell you that this PowerPoint actually is one developed by Lynn Packer in our office and Dan Squires, who's with the city of Derby. And they've been doing this roadshow with everybody from Rose Hill to Clearwater. And their conversation is about setting aside funds for right-of-way and maybe the zoning corridor tool that we used on Northwest Bypass to start protecting this corridor and start, I think, we don't have a state role in here. We haven't figured out how to do that yet, so it may be the county and these communities somehow cost-sharing, trying to get things moving. And some of them, I'm told, have started to allocate funds for right-of-way. They haven't given it to us, but, and then again, we'll need to look for more funding opportunities.
Thank you for the chance to speak. For the record, I do support the North Junction, and I'm sorry I got those two backwards in my head. I was writing down stuff, and I asked a stupid question, so sorry about that. But going back to the Northwest bypass, by the way, just an opinion, I'll say it again, hopefully this will catch on. I'd like to use the word expressway versus the word bypass. I think it's more positive. And I don't know if right now if anybody would like to comment, but I'd like to know whether or not Wichita Chamber, the Wichita City Council, and the Transportation Coalition, if they support the Northwest Expressway. Because I think it's important to know their position on this. But, one of the slides you had earlier, it says it reduces traffic on I-135 in Kellogg. I don't know when that statement was made initially, but I would just say now that we have 235 in Kellogg has been incredibly improved, I think the bigger relief would be 235 in Kellogg rather than 135 in Kellogg, just my opinion. And the idea of tolling out there is very exciting to me. I think that Secretary Lawrence is interested in that as well, and I think that might be the trigger to get that to move forward. So for the record, I'm supportive of that as well. Now back to the ARC 95 for just a second. ARC 95, if you are coming from any place south of Kellogg, there's no place to cross the railroad tracks anywhere from, the first place to cross is Waterman, which goes under again, truck traffic can't even do that. I guess you could get on Kellogg and go over the tracks that way, but there really isn't any place to cross the railroad tracks, and so that may be the number one reason why I think that this ARC 95 is interesting, plus its connection to KTA. But, and I think for the cost, it's a pretty good deal, and it needs to stay on the list of things we continue to work towards. But I would also make a point that for all the traffic coming from south of Kellogg, the two main ways into Wichita, Sedgwick County, is basically K-15 and the Rock Road. And both of those roads have problems. K-15 and 47th Street is continuing to be on one of the hottest spots for accidents in the entire county. I watched this, and the number of accidents that happen at K-15 and 47th, again, they're usually high-speed accidents. That's not a good situation, and I don't think there's anything out there that can address what's going on there. So if you can relieve some of the traffic off that intersection, that would certainly be positive. Second of all, public safety doesn't have any way to cross those trains, and you mentioned a minute ago 35 trains a day. I know it's a little higher than that right now, but I think that the projection is to be up over 60 trains a day. So continuing to add, almost double our train traffic is going to make this much worse. And I've talked to a lot of people in my district about what are their priorities, or are you willing to go south to go across the train tracks? Assuredly, in other words, the train can't stop you because you're going to go over the tracks. Some of them are very supportive of the idea. A lot of other people say they're not willing to drive south to get it to the overpass. So again, I'm very, very supportive of ARC 95, but I'd like to say I don't know where to start the process, but I think we need to talk about an overpass at 47th Street. I keep bringing this up, and I don't know what the process is, but I think we need to have that on the list. And then in terms of Rock Road, it's 4 lanes, but it's non-separated, and the traffic on Rock Road is certain times of the day is just unbelievable. And I don't know if there's any easy solutions to that problem out there either. Anyway, if you're coming from south part of the county, you can cross the river at Mulvane, 83rd Street, 63rd, 47th, MacArthur, Pawnee, but those are miles apart. So I do think we need something south. And again, I've supported North Junction, I support the Northwest Expressway. I think it's very much important that we continue to support the south side of Sedgwick County. That's all I got, thanks.
Okay, so just real briefly, I think that it's fair for me to say that it's in WAMPO's list. All these are in WAMPO's list. All these are in the South Central list. And I think it's hard to, sometimes you put a list out. I'm not going to say they're prioritized within the list. I mean, we had as an overall first pick was the North Junction, but we basically solved that problem. And so when you go below that, I think they haven't picked a front runner, but we're just actively working to move any of these forward where we can. And I know you've talked about 47th before. That's a very difficult situation. I like what you're saying about 95th getting some of the traffic off of it, but it's kind of like working in a canyon right there. So it's really, I don't know how we fix that, but we can certainly continue that conversation. Anything else? Lindsay's trying to throw me off the stage. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.